Harry and Meghan, love them or hate them, no one sits in the middle.
I think it's going to take more than one quasi-royal tour to change public opinion.
I feel like I don't know her at all. The mask never slipped.
She's wearing these clothes while she's kind of hugging children.
Yes.
And saying, if you go online, you can click and get these sandals or my dress.
During that Sandringham summit that they agreed they would not commercialise their royal titles.
Trouble for Sarah Ferguson. She's been in hiding.
I think eventually she's going to have to come back and face the music.
She's an unexploded bomb, let's be honest. Welcome to Royal Exclusive, where globe-trotting Sussexes, royal milestones and a runaway ex-duchess are making all the headlines in another dramatic week for the House of Windsor. Harry and Meghan have wrapped up their drama-filled trip down under, but was this faux royal tour a dress rehearsal for a UK comeback? And with Meghan facing criticism for monetising motherhood to sell candles, the Sussex strategy is under the spotlight like never before. Back home, King Charles marks what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's 100th birthday with an emotional tribute. Plus, Fergie is back on the front pages as she resurfaces living in luxury Austrian exile. I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor of The Sun, and joining me to unpack it all are Royal Reporter for news.com.au Bronte Coy and GB News Royal Correspondent Cameron Walker. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Cameron, we've got a lot to get through this week, OK? We've had the commemorations for what would have been the Queen's 100th birthday. We found Sarah Ferguson, and we're heading off to US in a couple of days. But to your left, OK, fresh off a flight from Australia, heavily jet-lagged, but pumped up.
She doesn't look very jet-lagged.
With lots and lots of coffee, is Bronte Coy. And Bronte, you were basically, let's be honest, at the inner sanctum of Harry and Meghan's trip down under. It was very lucky or unlucky to be there for the entire week. But you're back. You rushed here from the airport. Give us some gossip. What can you tell us about that trip that we don't know?
It's such a beast, isn't it? Harry and Meghan, the whole conversation around them, love them or hate them, no one sits in the middle. You're on either side of it. So obviously when I was asked to do this, I thought, what a fascinating week to be just up close and personal and see what it's all like. And it was fascinating. Firstly, I've got to say, having followed all the headlines and written a lot of them over recent years about Prince Harry, I think I'd created this perception of him that he would be very surly and unpleasant. He seemed to love the job of being a royal because, make no mistake, this looked a lot like a royal tour. I can tell you from the front row seat I had, it looked a lot like a royal tour, bar the commercial aspects. But Meghan, on the other side of it, it was very interesting. I thought that she would, at this point, have had this presence that was a little bit more effortless. And having watched her again for those few days, I feel like I don't know her at all. The mask never slipped. It was so interesting and fascinating to watch that unfold. And also, as I say, it did look so much like a royal tour. And all these years on, watching them sort of do that job, a number of times in my mind, I thought, well, how did we end up here? It's like we've done a full circle. They left the royal family, they went and launched all their commercial projects, and now they're back in this sort of half in, half out, which was exactly what they'd initially pitched and it was turned down. But I do feel like we've now entered very much a new era.
So during that trip, it looked like a royal tour. If it looks like a royal tour, sounds like a royal tour, it's a royal tour, isn't it? But there were commercial deals that were launched while you were out there. And we were sitting here in the UK and viewers were watching, in the US and around the world. What was it like when you were out there? Because, as I say, it looked like a royal tour. We had hospital visits, we had Bondi Beach. But during that, there was drops where they put this, you went on Masterchef. And then there was this AI clothing line, which it sits uncomfortable with me. I don't know what it's like on the ground. How did everyone react? Because she's wearing these clothes while she's kind of hugging children.
Yes.
And saying, if you go online, you can click and get these sandals or my dress.
Yeah, it's because, of course, when there are actual royal tours, we're always clamouring to find out what the Princess of Wales is wearing. But this is very different because this is a commercially associated one. Apparently, Meghan's invested in this company and obviously she's earning money from this. And it was a little jarring. I did make it known at the time, I will say, I thought the timing of it was very odd. I mean, I think it was an odd thing to roll out while they were there because there were so many moments that were sort of emotional visits with the sick kids at the hospital or even meeting with the survivors of Bondi. And that's where there's just not this perfect fit for the commercial and the philanthropy with royals. This is where it does get a little jarring. With that said, in fairness, I've got to say, I thought there would potentially be flashpoints. I thought, that the mood in Australia is often very similar to how it is here in Britain, where they can really inflame people and their fans are very passionate. And I thought there'd be flashpoints. Surely someone will say something to them or there'll be a moment during this tour. Everywhere they went,
So looking optimistically, it wasn't a disaster. That's what you were saying, that it wasn't torpedoed or anything.
I was right there next to them. I heard everything that was being said to them for days. And I have to say, from that position, everywhere they went, they were very, very, very warmly received. People were extremely excited to meet them, particularly when Harry did his military-related things in Canberra on the Wednesday. It was such a positive environment, and people were very excited to talk to them. And with that said, they've, of course, handpicked events that are in line with their communities they've worked with previously. So it's obviously not unexpected that they would be very receptive. But it was very positive on the ground. Where that sits more broadly, I still don't know.
On the ground, it looked a bit chaotic at times. I mean, let's just think about the Bondi, because that Bondi trip would have been quite emotional, really. They were meeting they were meeting survivors. They were meeting people who had been there during that horrific terrorist attack. But it looked chaotic on the beach, and I did see some footage of there was a sunbather that refused to move. What happened there?
Well, I tripped over her first. That footage was not caught, but it was a very chaotic moment. So she was laying there on the beach and just refused to move. And you know what? She had a day off and power to her. But you're right, that scene was an interesting one because, of course, we've spoken so much about Harry's concerns over security. Now, that specifically relates to the UK, but you'd think that would be sort of more broadly as well. There was a lot of debate in Australia in the lead up to this about what was going to happen with their security. People were adamant that taxpayers should not fund it, which I understand because, of course, they were earning money while they were there. So there was somewhat of a police presence, but it was more about public safety as opposed to being sort of a personal bodyguards for Harry and Meghan. So they have their own smaller operation of security, but that they are funding themselves. So when we got to Bondi, they walked out of that bathers pavilion where they'd met with the survivors. And all of a sudden, people had obviously heard that they were in town. And so they just kind of swarmed them. And everyone, that was very positive. They were asking for selfies and calling out questions. But the crowd was gathering as we were moving. And we started moving faster and faster for probably that exact security reason, jogging alongside them. But it did feel quite chaotic. It was a small period of time. As I said, it was positive, but there was, given Harry's concerns over security in the past, it was quite an interesting situation to find yourself in.
See, Bronte, these are anecdotes, but they're not gossip. I've asked for gossip. But no, seriously, Cameron, where do you stand on this idea that it is a faux royal tour, or it is a royal tour, but there was lots of monetised aspects? Because I've noted that she also released some candles that are relevant in some of the topics and descriptions to her two children.
Yeah, that Mother's Day candles, as you say, the descriptions kind of themed on the two children. I think Lilibet's has some water lilies in there as a scent, and not Harry's, and Archie's has ginger in there, perhaps a nod to his hairstyle. But what I think is jarring for the candles in particular is that the descriptions talk about Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. Now, I thought during that Sandringham summit that they agreed they would not commercialise their royal titles. So the question is, if, as it appears, that's exactly what they are doing, how are they getting away with it? And just on the broader point in terms of the royal tour, I think if I'd been in a coma for 6 years and woke up just before this tour started, I would have thought they're still working members of the royal family and it's all great, what is going on. But as you say, Bronte, it is this kind of half in, half out royal tour. They are doing philanthropic engagements on topics which are close to their hearts, alongside these commercial engagements, particularly Meghan, I noted. There were more commercial opportunities for Meghan in Australia than there was perhaps for Harry. The key difference is they were not representing King Charles on an officially sanctioned royal tour as King Charles being head of state. They were there in a private capacity. So arguably from their point of view, they would say, well, we can do this if we want. But I just keep going back to that Sandringham summit and what the late Queen said and saying you can't be half in, half out. You can't commercialise your royal titles. And is this going to be the new normal for Harry and Meghan when they come to the UK, if they come to the UK in the summer? Are we going to see a similar situation unfold? And what is King Charles and Prince William going to think of that?
Well, what can they do about it? I mean, one of the interesting things you mentioned there about Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, and are they being monetised? They don't seem to make a final decision on what they want to be called when they were in Australia. I think when she first visited, she said, "Oh, just call me Meg," and this is H. And then we had her, she was advertised as Duchess of Sussex at a speaking engagement. And then I think, Bronte, your story that you wrote there saying that they were kind of frustrated that they had been called royal, or Meghan had been called royalty when she was to appear on MasterChef.
Yes, this was quite interesting. There was a bit of a kerfuffle while I was there. And as you say, as you rightly point out with the titles, and it was when I don't know if you'll count this as gossip, you can just let me know afterwards. But when we were at the hospital before they arrived, people were quite stressed about what to call them, and they were asking, and the team made it very clear, they're very relaxed about titles, which again, it doesn't all sort of move together seamlessly.
It doesn't seem that way that they're relaxed about titles.
But that's
it
what,
seems
and
they're
that's what
obsessed with their titles. You point out the Prince and Princess. I don't get the message here. They're royalty. It's a really difficult balancing act because they're going there as members of the royal family on a private visit, and we haven't got to the bottom of how they actually use their titles yet. So,
and the MasterChef one was quite interesting. So I'm sure as British viewers are across as well. So MasterChef is, of course, the cooking show, and in Australia it's a huge show. So there's a lot of interest when that broke that she'd be on there. But that was filmed while she was there, and the news broke later that day. But when the introduction for her happened, one of the judges there had very excitedly, I'm sure everyone has seen the promo, very excitedly says, kitchen royalty, etc. And the word royalty there is what sources close to the Meghan told me really irritated them, because apparently they had made very clear in emails and their correspondence prior to her appearance that word was not to be used. And I questioned that because, again, we've got the candles with Prince and Princess. I don't know. There's no strict policy on all of this. And I questioned why that word specifically was the problem. And it's still not clear to me why, but she was their team was very frustrated by that, is what was the exact quote. Very annoyed, very frustrated. And they were outside the doors when the introduction happened. So apparently they didn't know, and they found out when the promo dropped that night.
Yeah, I mean, very convenient for MasterChef, of course, because if you say the word royal in a tease or in a promo, there's going to be more viewers, or at least viewers are going to not switch off. So convenient for them. Nonetheless, I can see a situation where the celebrity judge just forgot about all the briefing they'd been given not to use the words royalty, got very overly excited that Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, was in the building and said it anyway. But MasterChef then kept it in the edit by the looks of it. So tricky for them. But there is a conflicts of interest here in the sense that, OK, they are telling the MasterChef team not to use the word royals because you don't capitalise on the royal titles, etc., etc. But then in the candles, we've got them using in the description Prince Archie, Princess Lilibet. So where's the line drawn here?
Well, we need to draw a line. The King and Prince William at some stage need to maybe draw a line, because is there touchiness, as we've reported a couple of weeks ago and also in the paper, is there touchiness because they want to replicate this Australia tour worldwide? They want to use it as a blueprint to maybe come back to the UK, Bronte.
Yes, it's very interesting. As I said, once it all wrapped up, the feeling on the ground was very positive. I think the headlines that were generated around it, obviously not so much, but they seemed to think it was very successful. Certainly they were feeling it went really well, and in terms of hitting all the marks, it did. But I've been, after this, I've obviously been asking around and trying to find out what this means for the future. And sources close to them have told me that this was seen as the trial run. They've done it. They feel it worked, and they said they will unapologetically continue with this plan now into the future, which is them using the commercial engagements they book to fund the philanthropic side of the tour, and they will run them as that sort of package into the future. And they do have other tours of this style planned, although they would not tell me, my source would not tell me.
Unapologetically. This is the gossip we're after, Bronte. This is why we've got you the car straight from Heathrow to tell us what's going on.
Yeah.
So they they believe that Australia was successful.
Absolutely. And that the word unapologetically was used, and that was the one that stood out to me as well, because clearly they're seeing the backlash and people criticising aspects of this half-in, half-out model, but this is what they want to do, and they do feel it worked, and they are happy about it, and I think this is now the new era of the Sussexes. We are going to be seeing this sort of thing now.
Well, research, I've got here, research conducted by a polling agent called Roy Morgan in Australia. It showed that 81% of those surveyed indicated the trip had done nothing to enhance their perception of the Sussexes. Have they got their, they got their head in the sand here, the Sussexes? Did they really have a successful trip?
Well, I think the most successful part of their trip, and arguably the most positive coverage, was when they were doing these so-called royal engagements, the kind of philanthropic engagements at the Children's Hospital that
the royal
Elizabeth II opened. Yes, exactly. The Invictus Games on Sydney Harbour with Prince Harry's support for veterans and service personnel, etc. Where they got bad press was this blurring of a lines between commercial and the royal engagements. Look, if they are claiming that in order to do these philanthropic engagements, we have to do these commercial deals, then fine. But I think what was really, really jarring, I think, to a number of people in Australia, the UK, and obviously it's been picked up in the press as well, is just certain flashpoint moments. What I mean by that is Meghan hugging a very sick child in a hospital, or Meghan and Harry with the Bondi Beach terror attack survivors on Bondi Beach. But then what she is wearing is then put on this platform which she's invested in, and if you click on it, then and pay for whatever clothes she's wearing, then she gets a cut from it. It just is really uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people. That kind of commercial dealings. It's one thing doing speaking engagements at a wellness retreat, fine. But when you're blurring the lines between the two, that's where I think there's an issue.
I completely agree, and it's going to be interesting to see how that moves forward, particularly if they do unapologetically come to the UK and run the same blueprint here. You really think the king will stand for that?
Why? Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's funny because you actually called this before the trip. You said, is this a dummy run for what could happen? And it's interesting that I am hearing now, from sources close to them that you were right. I don't like to give you too much credit.
Well, we've warned the royal family then in that case that this is their plan for worldwide global domination. Royal titles, using their royalty to go places, do these philanthropic events, and also, by the way, you can buy my dress if you like it.
Well, that's it. As I say, this was flagged before the trip. Surely the palace had the same sort of thoughts before it all got underway. What does this mean? What does this mean for the future? And I think you're right. It doesn't sit well, the two ideas of these commercial aspects and the philanthropy, but the argument that their people close to them make is they say, well, these things are expensive, security is expensive, the cost of getting everyone out there is expensive. They just say they don't want to take money from charities to fund that. But at the same time, this was what the late Queen was concerned with. It doesn't sit very comfortably having these two aspects together.
I think we need to keep the two totally separate. The commercial stuff and the royal stuff, there can't be any blurring of the lines. I mean, when it comes to are they going to come across to the UK in this summer, I don't think still Harry is going to bring Meghan across to the UK until the security thing is sorted out. So I believe RAVEC, the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, haven't yet made their decision on the new kind of security report that was done on Prince Harry and Meghan's kind of well-being when they're in the UK in terms of their security situation. So unless they grant, when they're in the UK, 24-hour armed police protection paid for by British taxpayers, I hasten to add, Harry has always maintained over the last couple of years he refuses to bring Meghan, let alone the children, to the United Kingdom. So unless he has a massive U-turn, I don't see it happening.
No. They did do speaking engagements, as you pointed out, paid or not paid. Maybe we can discuss what actually happened there. But one of the things that stood out to me was Meghan and Harry had a bit of a whinge. Harry spoke about about fatherhood and about his childhood again, which he's done before, which I don't think goes down well. And Meghan repeated a claim that she made a couple of years ago that she was the most trolled person in the world. Bearing in mind we spent the last 15 minutes, really digging into everything that's gone on. She might have a point, but this whinging doesn't really sit well for me.
Meghan's comments were made at a youth mental health engagement where young people were discussing their action plans and what they'd come up with to tackle mental health issues, particularly in regional areas. It was actually a really great engagement. Again, especially Harry, but the pair of them, they do the royal activities well. But you're right, it was an interesting moment, and even when it happened, she gave this personal anecdote, which she has said before, so it wasn't. Did it need to be said again in this setting when we're hearing from young people, and that was the purpose of it? It felt a little bit out of place for that reason, and she spoke for quite a while.
You go into hospital and you're meeting children who are seriously ill. You're going to Bondi Beach where people were gunned down by a terrorist, and then you're standing there in a thing going, people have said nasty things about me online.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this has been one of their ongoing problems. I think that especially for Meghan, she's just a bit tone deaf about releasing this information. I mean, it didn't land well the first time she said it. It was weird that it was brought up again in this context. I have to say, it felt jarring. Harry's speech about, and he did get personal. I was there for the summit where he spoke, the paid speaking engagement, but also when he spoke at a Movember event, which was about men's mental health, particularly with fatherhood. Now, of course, through the lens of fatherhood, it was likely that he was going to bring up the king. And so that was very interesting. He was quite guarded when he spoke about it, but he said that he viewed his children as an upgrade of him in the same way that he thinks that children should always be an upgrade of their parents. And he said, not necessarily that I think that I'm an upgrade of my father, but it was interesting that he touched on that as well, because it doesn't seem to land well with people, when he brings up the king. Certainly probably doesn't land well with the palace. But yes, it was. And to the point about the polls earlier, this all ties in. I think that if with 82% of people not moved on them, and I said this before the tour started, if you already loved them, you probably love them more because everything they do, they support. If you didn't like them and you criticise them, you probably, that is bolstered that, and I can see how that has done so. I don't think it was ever going to sway people dramatically.
Well, after spending a week with them, our viewers would like to know, where do you stand on that then? Have you changed your opinion on them, or what do you do as a journalist?
Have I changed my opinion? Well, I did really try to go in and just observe it. We haven't seen them in action like this in years, so it was a really unique opportunity to see what they were like all these bruising years on. Harry he seemed to be in his element. So he seemed to genuinely love everything he was doing. I think that maybe took me by surprise again, because there has been so much controversy around him, well, both of them. But my position on them, look, I honestly had the thought watching them, again, particularly Harry, he was so good at the job of being a royal. He grew up with it, and it just seems like maybe it wasn't well thought out that he stopped doing it because he seemed to be in his element.
Well, we'll move on in a minute. But Cameron, just one last question to you, if you don't mind. I'm told that in the press releases, some very hard-working member of staff here has counted, and in the words "connection" and "connected" were mentioned 30 times across the press releases issued by the Sussexes. Did they connect, do you think?
Did they connect? Well, they certainly connected with the crowds of well-wishers who were there at various engagements. Did they connect with the wider public? I think the jury's still out on that. I think it's going to take more than one quasi-royal tour to change public opinion. But I don't think it's impossible. If you look back to the 1990s, Queen Camilla, then Camilla Parker Bowles, was arguably one of the most hated women in Britain. And she's completely changed the public perception about her. So I think it's certainly possible. I just want to make one point on the trolling comments that Meghan made, if I may. I mean, I think what she was trying to do was then give advice to the younger people if they are having experience of online hate. It didn't land well, I also agree with that. But she says she's the most trolled person online. There is also thousands of cult accounts, nicknamed the so-called Sussex Squad, particularly on X, who are so vile towards other members of the royal family, particularly the Princess of Wales, when she was undergoing cancer treatment, to the point where it was just pure evil, at some points. And, they come after all of us, and they come after to other members of the royal family and anyone who criticises Harry and Meghan in whatever capacity. And I just think if you're going to start talking about yourself and the fact that you have been trolled, maybe you need to talk about all of the online negativity that is happening around the royal family.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but they could have always come out with a statement when Princess of Wales was getting horribly trolled online, and they didn't. They were offered the chance, and they didn't. Let's move on, because let's talk about trouble. Did you see? We must have seen the video that King Charles did, because it's would have been the Queen's 100th birthday if she had survived. Now he did an address where he spoke about the late Queen's legacy of hope, but he admitted that he believes that she would have been troubled by the times that we now live in. However, he did say, "I take heart from her belief that goodness will always prevail." There's a lot of trouble in the world at the moment. What do we speculate Charles may be referring to there?
How long have you got, man? It's a long list. I mean, there's the obvious ones, isn't there, to do with his own, the royal family as a whole. We've got Andrew, of course, who's been arrested and has denied all allegations against him, but he's lost all of his titles, something which I think would have very much troubled the late Queen if we were to believe that Andrew was her favourite son. And, of course, the continued fallout from Harry and Meghan, as we've just discussed, and whether it's right that they can be a half-in, half-out royals. But then there's the wider conflicts in the world as well, with Iran, and also, is he going to have the same Prime Minister in a couple of weeks? All of this is going to be going through the King's mind.
You talk about I asked the palace, I'm sure you did the same, as what specifically is the king talking about? What does he mean? It's, it says it in the statement. You read into it what you wish. It could be anything and everything you identify, or you find what you identify in the statement. But I don't think they rule out the family drama.
No.
I don't think they rule out that she would have been troubled. Of course she'd have been troubled by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
I'm glad he said it too in that context.
You think?
Touching. Well, it was a really personal tribute, and it was with darling mama and all of that. And I think that it's absolutely true. I think the king has a really good way of sort of making things universal, and I can see why the palace hasn't sort of specified exactly what he meant. But everything you've listed, and so many more things, I'm sure, are completely accurate. And it has that way of sort of bringing everyone in on it. But it is also, it's completely true that, and a good insight into the Queen to say she would have been troubled by it. But she looks for the good in how the world can go, and there's an optimism to it. So I can understand why they probably didn't specify in that, but I also think it's fairly obvious what he meant.
Well, I know you, as we keep saying, how you're in Australia with Harry and Meghan. However, me and Cameron were very lucky this week, where we spent a good couple of hours inside Buckingham Palace with the King, the Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales. Mic drop there for you.
Lovely.
We were at a very special bash where they were marking what would have been the late Queen's 100th birthday, and there was 3 amazing 100-year-olds there that shared the same birthday. It was quite a good outing, wasn't it, Cameron? It was good to see everyone come together. There was people from patronages. I mean, how did you enjoy them?
Yeah, I mean, there was a good 200 guests there. Joan, John and Mary were the 3 centenarians, if that's how you pronounce it, who were turned 100 on the same day as Queen Elizabeth II. And I chatted to all 3 of them, and they have obviously grown up with everything that Queen Elizabeth II had grown up with, and they saw it as an immense privilege to be there. King Charles helped them cut a birthday cake, personally gave them their 100th birthday cards, and as you said, there was a number of patronages charities which used to have the late Queen as their patron there to represent the charity, and members of the royal family got to spend time with them. My favourite part, though, was a specific cocktail that had been made in the kitchens downstairs to do with, it was a Dubonnet cocktail, which I was lucky enough to try. Gin Dubonnet was the late Queen's
part of the
favourite.
job, of course.
Part of a job. Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? My job. Yeah, so Gin Dubonnet was the Queen's favourite drink, but because it was a daytime drink, they didn't want to put gin in it because it was an afternoon reception. So it was Dubonnet wine, it was rosemary, lemon and tonic water, and it did taste very refreshing.
Well, it had a feel of a garden party about it. It had a kind of garden street party type thing with all the bunting. But I'm intrigued by the group family photograph. They all posed for a photograph beforehand. It's the first one, I think, since the coronation, I'd suggest. What did you make of that picture, Cameron? Because you look at it and you think, well, there's a lot of people not in it. There was a line-up. I try and go through them if I can try and do them. There's King, Queen, Catherine and William, Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, the Gloucesters, Princess
Alexandra, Princess Anne,
and Princess Anne,
Duke of Kent,
and the Duke of Kent. It did look to me like the royals were a little bit old and maybe a little bit thin on the ground.
Yes. It was a lovely photograph and you could see what they were trying to do, but there was a distinct lack of younger working royals there. I mean, all of them over the age of 40, and then you've got the Prince and Princess of Wales, clearly the next generation, the next in line. And it got me thinking, that photograph, because it did really illustrate that they are going to be a bit thin on the ground in years to come. How are they going to connect, or how are they connecting with the younger generations, both here in the UK, but around the world in the Commonwealth realms? The Commonwealth, of course, I think it's about a third of the Commonwealth population are under the age of 30. How are you going to connect with that generation if you don't have any younger people there? And also just in terms of filling the amount of engagements which take place on an almost daily basis, most of which don't get media coverage. So then the question is the future King William V going to fundamentally change the way things are done here? Are we going to see ribbon cutting at all? He's already talked, of course, about changes on his agenda. We don't know what change that is. But I did ask before the engagement, are you going to bring Prince George along to this 100th reception, 100th birthday reception for Queen Elizabeth II as, the future king? And they said no. And school couldn't have been an excuse because Lambert didn't go back until the day after. I think it was arguably a mistake not to bring George, because I think it's opened up a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, and not only that, Lady Louise, James, Beatrice and Eugenie did not go. They're not young. Well, they're younger than me.
Excuse
but
me.
but they're not. You know, they're not the, as you say, the kind of majorly young generation. But that picture felt like it could have been taken in black and white.
But they're never going to be working royals. You talk about Eugenie Beatrice, and I mean, we've seen, I think when the princess was ill, Prince William kind of called upon his cousins to help host a garden party in Buckingham Palace. So perhaps we'll see a bit more of that. But I do wonder what the core monarchy is going to look like in the next couple of decades. I mean, clearly George, Charles and Louis are going to get older, but there's no compelling them to be working royals, apart from arguably Prince George. So it'll be interesting to see how William handles this.
Because they'll surely get the same opportunity to go to university, etc. It's not like they turn 18 and turn up on the royal staffing roster.
Yeah.
It will just be a staffing issue, really, to cover all these engagements.
We also got a small insight into what the statue will be for the late Queen. It's her. We always speculated about what image they would choose, and it's a young Queen. It's a statue of her in her garter robes. I think she was in her 20s. In 1955, it was based on a portrait. The King saw a little model of it. He said it was fantastic. What do you think of the choice of statue?
I love the Prince Philip aspect to it as well, to immediately bring it to the side. I liked it. You look like you're about to say you don't like it. I thought it looked nice, and I thought it was a nice moment seeing the King see it. But I also what really struck me was there's the smaller Prince Philip looking up at her because he was her steadfast companion and was always there with supporting her through everything. I thought that was a very nice touch in the way that was done. But I can tell you don't like it.
Well, I really like the nod to Prince Philip and the eternal love they have for each other, and the wedding tiara is going to be the model for the bridge that's going to go across the pond in St James's Park. I don't not like it. I think it will look lovely, and clearly the King thinks it's fantastic. However, some of the original designs which were proposed, my favourite one, and a lot of people have actually also said this on the internet, the one of the Queen on the horse overlooking the Mall, it was grand, it was a spectacle, it was something that you would want to come and see as a tourist if you're in London, and go and see the National Memorial to Queen Elizabeth II, because it was huge, and it was a nod to the fact she loved horse riding and horse racing and all the rest of it. And I kind of assumed that would be the one they choose, and then they didn't. It's a much smaller statue of her in bronze, and it's hard to tell until you actually see it built and in place. But I think a lot of people are just going to walk past it and not even notice. I
like it. It's understated. It's the Queen. She doesn't need to have a huge statue and a huge memorial. We know exactly who she is.
Tell that to Queen Victoria.
I would love to one day.
That's a good point, though. It more reflects her. But I totally understand your point. I did love that other one. I remember saying it is very grand. But perhaps this was just a better reflection.
Yeah, understated. I quite like it. Let's do a bit of understated class, bit of class. But it is. It would have been the late Queen's 100th birthday, and maybe it's a little time to just briefly think about her legacy. Do you think she's still held in the reverence that we, the nation, had for her when she died in 2022?
I think so. I think this has been a difficult few years for the royal family, but particularly difficult few months. But I think that the Queen, she has such a strong legacy over so many decades of moments that really connected with people and that they respect. And there's great admiration for her. And the way that that's endured, I think that...
Has it not been tarnished by Andrew?
It's not been helpful, I would say. I would say the Andrew ongoing issue, and again, I say ongoing because we still don't really know the full scope of what went on, and this is all still kind of unfolding. But I think that the Queen, there is such great respect for the Queen. She was a constant, particularly during so many difficult times over the years, over the decades. And I think that people still hold her in that regard, particularly probably because the last few years have been very turbulent. And you think back to that moment when you felt that you had that steadying presence, and then that's probably actually raised the admiration.
Cameron, do you think we will be celebrating King Charles's 100th birthday? Not, I don't mean it like that. I mean, will we still mark it? Will we still have the same reverence and respect for King Charles III as we currently do for Queen Elizabeth II?
I think every monarch leaves their mark on the world and on this country. I think Queen Elizabeth II was so unique because not only was she never destined to the throne, she was on it for more than 70 years. So Britain's longest reigning monarch is always going to have that extra level of aura about them. I think Queen Elizabeth is still, according to the latest YouGov polling, the most popular member of the royal family. King Charles isn't, and in fact William and Catherine are above him in terms of the pecking order. But, you know, King Charles does great work in his own unique way when it comes to being at the forefront of, you know, the climate change debate, and also the work he's done with the King's Trust and young people and all the rest of it. It's far more understated, perhaps, than the fanfare that we will give Queen Elizabeth II.
Okay, all right, I'll take that on board. Charles the King spoke about troubled times. Trouble for Sarah Ferguson. She's been in hiding. We found her, The Sun found her, it was a front page. We had a picture of her. She just popped out of her £2,000 a night resort just to go to a local ski resort. It raises questions, doesn't it, with Sarah? Why she run away? Why is she hiding? You've got US Congress saying that she has questions to answer. What's the future for Sarah once she leaves, ultimately has to leave this Australian bolt hole? Should she be questioned?
Did you say Australian or Australian?
Oh, I said Austrian bolt hole.
I found this fascinating because we have discussed on the show where in the world is Sarah Ferguson for so long. So well done to The Sun for finding her. But one of the major questions is who is funding this? Where is her money coming from? And I think that and how long will she lay low for? Presumably she can't stay there forever.
Well, I think the rule in EU residency is 90 days. So we're getting quite close to that. But Cameron, she's her former home, Royal Lodge, has been searched. Her ex-husband has been arrested, and she has been named numerous times contacting Jeffrey Epstein. While we're not accusing her of any crime, surely the authorities, now they know in Austria, will want to speak to her.
Well, her default seems to always be kind of run away and then quietly reflect when there's a scandal about her. I mean, I agree with you, Bronte. I don't know how she's getting this money to fund this luxury lifestyle continually. I think there was rumours she spent some time in Ireland as well, and then this retreat in Switzerland too. I think eventually she's going to have to come back and face the music, despite not wanting to. I mean, I can't see a situation where she's going to fly across to the US and directly answer questions like the Clintons have had to do and others. Let's just wait and see. I think she'd want to stay out of the spotlight as much as possible. Does she want to come back into public life? I doubt it very much in terms of being in public, but will she need to in order to get more money to fund this lifestyle?
Well, she's an unexploded bomb. Let's be honest. Sarah's an unexploded bomb because she is. We asked to interview her because we went to Austria and we were taking pictures. We said, "Are we allowed to interview her?" No, she won't comment. Everyone else has been trying to talk to her. Even Newsnight, famously who created that car crash interview with Andrew, had the chutzpah to say, "Sarah, would you like to do a Newsnight interview?" And among many different TV companies and production teams, she's refused. But at some stage, she's got to say something to somebody.
It depends. I suppose it depends on what her plan is for the future. Maybe she doesn't have one yet, but if she were to try to have some sort of life after this, she would have to speak out. There would have to be explanations as to, as you say, she's not accused of criminality, but there are huge questions about her ties to Jeffrey Epstein as per these emails and all the communications that came out in the Epstein files. So, and unless she is being funded forever by someone, presumably she will have to move on from this chapter. And I don't see how she does that unless she does answer those questions. But then again, as you say, I can't imagine her doing that. So what next for Sarah?
Well, one person who hasn't spoken to the US authorities, as far as we're aware, is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. And Julia Ratherley, our Home Affairs correspondent, give her a shout out at The Sun. She's still going through the Epstein files, 3.5 million files. And we found, a couple of years ago, we wrote a story in The Sun saying that the FBI had sent a mutual legal assistance request to the Home Office asking him to testify or help them get him to testify. It got quietly dropped, and we've learned, Julia's found from looking into these files, that what actually happened was that the Home Office believed that if they did compel Andrew to speak to investigators, he would have sued them in the Home Office, as he would have sued them in the High Court. Is this just another case of Andrew refusing to talk and getting lawyers to, wriggle off the hook?
I mean, quite possibly. I mean, clearly he doesn't want to talk. He did the disastrous Newsnight interview. That did not go well for him, for obvious reasons.
But he's put statements out saying that after Newsnight, he did say, I would be prepared to speak to, or during Newsnight, I would be prepared to speak to any authorities. And we're learning now that he's desperately trying not to.
Well, he said to Emily Maitlis something along the lines of, I'd have to look at legal advice, but if it's my duty to do so, I will do, in his kind of way. But he said it to Emily Maitlis, and then subsequently very PR'd statements have come out via the palace or via his spokespeople later down the line, as you say, saying he would be prepared to give evidence. But I think that was before the tranche of Epstein files were released, and perhaps either PR team or his lawyers knew the full facts of his correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, obviously we have to always say that he denies all allegations against him, but nonetheless, it's going to put him in really hot water, because we saw how he was put under pressure with Emily Maitlis, who wasn't in possession of the full facts. So coming up against US Congress, who do have all the Epstein files in front of them, is going to be a bit of a bloodbath, frankly.
And as you rightly say, yes, he did say that in the Newsnight interview. And I remember months afterwards, he was saying, I'll cooperate. It really, there's so much now that he has said publicly that we know has been disputed with correspondence, and particularly with the Epstein files, that it feels like just the latest. But it is still, it's quite outrageous that he was claiming that he would cooperate and was saying it so publicly. And then we now read these emails.
We see the missives is the Home Office saying we expect him to. We expect him to. If this goes all the way, we expect a court case. But so we're learning more and more. Still not going away. Talking of the US, me and Cameron again,
Yes.
Bronte. You went to Australia, Harry and Meghan. Me and Cameron are off with the King and Queen. In a couple of days' time, we're going to be with the King and Queen in Washington and New York. I can't think of a state visit that almost is such high stakes, Cameron. What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I'm actually really interested to see the reaction to ordinary Americans on the ground. What do they think of the King and Queen? Obviously, they've got Harry and Meghan living in the US, but also just in terms of, do they respect the King and Queen and the British royal family? Because you look at what the White House have said, or President Trump specifically, about not only Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, but about our warships, likening them to toys compared to the US aircraft carriers, for example. Bearing in mind King Charles is head of state, how is that going to go down with the royal household? How's that gone down with Americans? So I think that's what I'm looking forward to. But also, just as a kind of being British point, is their state dinner going to match up to a state banquet at Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace? I'm not so sure, but the jury's out. I'll wait till I see it.
What about you? What are you excited about?
What I'm excited about? I'm excited. Do you know what my fear about this whole thing is? It's going to be polished. It's going to be fine. Well, I've got some great events that we're going to. As I say, the state dinner. He's making a speech at Congress. There's going to be a garden party that I think Trump will be completely on his best behaviour, and it'll be really grand. It will be really friendly and everything. But the minute the King flies off to Bermuda, journalists are going to phone up Donald Trump, say, what happened to the King? You know, what conversations did you have? He's going to come out on Air Force One, the next flight, and he said, what happened? And that's what it's going to be, what happens in the days after. Because I think the trip will go swimmingly well. The King's a professional. He knows what he's doing, doesn't he?
He does.
And you're exactly right that is always the danger. But I do think that the King has proven he knows the stakes, he knows the world he is living in as the monarch, and I think that he will be very well prepared to the best of his ability with someone who can be quite unpredictable. I think he would be very prepared for that going in.
And let's not forget, it's not his choice to go. It's not Queen Camilla's choice to go either. It's Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and the government who are sending the King and Queen on this royal charm offensive, despite the kind of abuse that Trump has hurled over the Atlantic. They are still prepared to send the King and Queen. Is this really the Prime Minister's last chance to smooth over a relationship with President Trump by using the King and his soft power?
Yeah, they're sending him there to save the Labour government and Starmer's skin. I mean, who knows if Starmer will be there by the time we come off air or by the time that we actually go, because he's under a lot of pressure.
There's a lot of official aspects to all of this, but I'd like you to know that when you come back, I too would like to come on the show and hear about all of the behind-the-scenes gossip.
We'll give you the gossip.
Yeah, you have given us some gossip, and in return, we will give you some return gossip.
We
Does that
deserve
sound
it.
fair?
We all deserve it. Thank you. I would like to hear it.
Right, we've just got time for our quickfire questions. OK, so take a deep breath. Which moment from the late Queen's life would you like to see immortalised as a statue?
Well, I want that horse. I want the Queen with a horse, but put a corgi next to it as well. Yeah.
There's so many really serious and significant moments, but I want to go for a more fun one. I would love at Paddington Station, you know, they have the little Paddington Bear statue. I would love, for me, I really associate the Queen, well, so many people do, the late Queen with the Paddington Bear. I would love to see that little scene immortalised.
Lovely. What food do you think Donald Trump would really like to serve the King at the US state visit?
McDonald's.
Yeah.
He loves fast food. You can imagine how much he would love that. Yes, they'll be sitting there, everyone else who served the fancy meal, and he would love to just, DoorDash it. up to the plates.
And finally, now that she's been found, where should Fergie head next on her Exile World Tour?
I think a British seaside town, Blackpool or Scarborough. I think she'd love it.
I would love to see her go to the US to answer those questions. We'll see perhaps if she considers that one an option for a destination. Unlikely.
Not Marsh Farm.
No.
No, I don't think
There's
so.
a caravan in the back garden. She could have that.
But isn't that what Andrew's living in?
Yeah.
Is he not? Yeah, oh, gosh. I don't think it will happen. Maybe a granny annex with Beatrice or Eugenie.
All right, let's see how it goes. So thanks, guys, and thanks for your gossip, Bronte, and thanks, Cameron. It was nice sharing the week's news with you both, so thank you.
Thank you.
Right, that's all we have time for on this week's Royal Exclusive. Thanks to my guests, Cameron and Bronte, and thanks to you, as always, for watching. Remember to subscribe to us here on our Royal Exclusive YouTube channel for the latest royal news, and we will see you next week.